So it is officially the first day of fall. It's time for cozy weather, pumpkin spice lattes, cozying up with a good book, and we've already had our first snowfall. Go Canada. Yay for Canadian weather. Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. Today I am doing a requested video, and that is a fall or autumn recommendations video. I really like a seasonal recommendations video. I haven't done one. I was sort of doing my own monthly recommendations with some genres, but I also enjoy people's seasonal recommendations videos. However, with me, I'm not so much a seasonal reader. Like, I don't read a lot of contemporary in the summer or any lighter books in the summer. I pretty much read the same all year round, although there are some books I'm more inclined to read during certain seasons. So I put together a couple. I have a couple from each genre. I have some middle grade in here as well, and I even have a contemporary book in here as well, believe it or not. So without further ado, here are some books I recommend that are perfect for cozying up with a cup of something hot to drink, a nice blanket during a fall storm or snowstorm if you live up here in Canada. So the first book I'm going to recommend is Close to You by Kira Isaac. This is an adult Christian contemporary read. So first of all, I don't read a lot of adult Christian fiction, and I also do not read a lot of contemporary. This was the book that kind of changed that for me. So Close to You follows Alison Shire. Yes, Shire as in where hobbits live. Alison Shire is kind of running away from an embarrassing situation or just trying to leave something behind her, but at the same time her faith is starting to waver as well, and she's kind of wondering if it's something real or her family's just saying it's just something people do, a religious thing. We also find Jackson Gregory, who is at the end of his rope. He just had a huge business catastrophe and is left with nothing, and he is also someone that has completely walked away from his faith, seeking money and fame, almost like a prodigal son type of deal with Jackson. Allison leaves her posh life in Wellington, New Zealand, and goes and becomes a tour guide on the sets and locations of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings movies by Peter Jackson. Yes, this girl got my dream job. Jackson follows along with his crazy uncle to go on this tour, hopefully to get a good business deal to kind of bring him back out of the situation he's in, where he meets Allison. Allison spots him as the fake Tolkien fan the moment he steps off the plane. Tons of shenanigans ensues on this tour, including Uruk-hai makeup, costumes, screaming children, seasickness, and some fanatical chick who actually thinks she's Arwen when she's in costume, trying to steal the Bag End mailbox when they're in Hobbiton. Yeah, there's some crazy Lord of the Rings fans in this book as well. It was laugh out loud hysterical. It was also such a heartwarming book. Also, I enjoy a lot of the faith elements in this one as well. Also, the willingness to wait until you're in a better place, especially in your faith, before coming together with someone else who is also struggling in their faith. So, waiting on God rather than pushing something that doesn't need to be pushed at the time. So, it has great faith elements, great story writing, laugh out loud moments, and it's just the perfect book for any Tolkien Middle-earth fan because it has a lot of references in it. The next two books are fairy tale retellings or literary retellings or just retellings in general. So the first retelling is a fairy tale retelling, and that is Shannon Hale's The Goose Girl. This has been recommended to me so often, and I finally picked it up in the month of August and loved it. It is such a great atmospheric book. It's got great characters. It's got fantastic relationship buildings. The romance in here is perfection. It is a great example of what a fantastic written romance is, and it was such a cute story and a cute relationship, and it was age appropriate for the ages of the characters. There was also amazing friendships in here, and a lot of focus is on the friendships that Izzy, our main character, makes, and it was just overall a really good read. It's got a fantastic magic system that kind of focuses more on the elements. There's no incantations or anything strange like that, but it's got a really good elemental magic, which I really enjoyed, and overall just a fantastic lighthearted read. I would consider this also appropriate for middle grade, like 12 and up would really enjoy this book. It's very lighthearted. There are some darker moments and some sadder things that do happen in the book. If you have any questions about those, just leave me some questions in the comments and I can answer that for you. But I gave it a 5-star rating when I read it. It was just a fantastic fairy tale retelling. The next book I'm going to recommend is a literary retelling, and that is Everland by Wendy Spinelli, and this is a retelling of Peter Pan. I'm loving this series. I was kind of apprehensive when I picked it up. I saw it in an Owl Crate unboxing last year, and then no one spoke of it again. The only other person I've seen mention this at all is Haley in Bookland. So it is an underrated book, but it is a really, really well-written book. It's also got some darker themes to it. It is a steampunk retelling of Peter Pan. Elements from the original Peter Pan story were placed in this so well. There was even elements I completely forgot about or didn't think they would put in here until they came up in the story, and I'm like, oh yeah, that happens. To be honest, the original Peter Pan story does not actually appeal to me after reading it for the first time last year. I'm not a huge fan of it, but I love retellings of it. I think it is a great world that you can add to, play around with, and just kind of play on the imagination of the original. So I really prefer the retellings of it. And again, this has a fantastic cast of characters and a lot of things that keep you guessing and keep you wondering, and it's not very predictable, which is also a good story. So this is another great adventure that is really good to curl up with on a stormy day. The next two books are middle grade, and the first one I want to recommend is The Girl of Incan Stars by Karen Milgard Hargrave. This is a UK cover and title. The North American cover and title, the cover is obviously different. The title is The Cartographer's Daughter, so if you're looking for it in the US, I ordered this from Book Depository because the title appealed to me more with the UK title, as well as the cover was gorgeous, so I picked it up from Book Depository. This follows Isabella, who is the daughter of a cartographer. She's living on this island, this kind of fictional island that's made up. I believe it's a fictional island made up. But everything changes the day the governor arrives on, the birds disappear, everybody is kind of sectioned off to one section of the island, and they are not allowed to leave or explore the rest of the island. And Isabella has a dream one day to fully chart out and map out her island and maybe even other worlds around it. Her parents used to map out other worlds when they were allowed to travel, but no one ever mapped out her island, so she wants to be the first to do so. But of course, being only contained to one part of the island, she doesn't think that's going to happen. Until some sad events happen in her village, which leads into a lot of different events of what is really going on with the island and why all of these events connect to the governor when he arrived. It's got a very whimsical feeling to it. It's got a very fantastical storyline to it. There's not a lot of magic or anything for that, but it does have some darker creature elements and just some darker elements for what was going on with the island. But it's got some great friendships, some great character developments. It had me guessing, it had me wondering what was going to happen, and it just really, by the second half of the book, I couldn't put it down, and I read it in one sitting because I just needed to know what happened to these characters. I find it appropriate for middle grade. Like I said, there are some darker elements, so maybe 12 and up with some of the darker creature elements, but it doesn't get too freaky or too scary. But again, if you have any questions, I'll answer them down below. It was a really good young heroine adventure story, and like I said, some great friendships in there as well, and very whimsical, lighthearted writing, even with some of the darker elements. The next book I'm going to recommend is probably an obvious one for all of us, but that is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. This is a great back-to-school type of book because school starts in autumn again, and I finally finished the entire series this year and loved it. I loved the characters, I loved the world, I loved the characters again. Like, everything about this book was just so good, and I can't believe I waited like 20 years to finish this book series, but it was so worth it. But just for the recommendation, I enjoyed it. It had such a fantastical element to it that the magic in it didn't bother me or connect me to the real world at all. Also, the characters were just incredible characters. It was incredible to grow along with these characters and to watch them grow and watch what they were going through. And every character, like, I liked my side characters, and these side characters were incredibly amazing. Like, there was no side character that I didn't love or love to hate or anything like that. Their characters were 110% some of the best well-written characters I've ever seen. So I do recommend the Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, or the entire Harry Potter series. Well written and addicting. 100% addicting. The next two books are dystopian, and the first dystopian I'm going to recommend is Anomaly by Krista McGee. This is a Christian YA dystopian, and it is my all-time favorite dystopian. If you have not yet read Anomaly, I highly recommend you do so. It is a well-written book. The storyline itself blew me away with how well-written the storyline was. In the second book, it feels like we took a completely different direction, but in the third book, it wraps both books up and both worlds up beautifully and just so well done. The characters in here are also fantastic. The faith elements were amazing of how they were incorporated. They weren't too preachy, they weren't over the top, they didn't steal from the story. They were just so well woven in with the rest of the story and so well done. And so the faith elements were just on point and just amazing in there, as well as the characters. This is also the only book where I've ever shipped a couple out of canon. The love triangle in here is perfection. Probably one of the best love triangles I've ever read, and it's the only time I've ever wanted her to end up with the guy she's not supposed to end up with in canon. So yeah, that was hard to read. It was sad. You guys should read this book. The next dystopian is probably a reread for everybody by this point, but The Hunger Games. This is a book I like to reread in the fall. I like to sit down and start rereading The Hunger Games and Catching Fire, and then Mockingjay I kind of get to by the winter time. I love The Hunger Games so much. This is what got me into the YA genre. Again, another fantastic group of characters. I love Effie Trinket and her character development. I love Katniss and Primrose. I basically fell in love with the story and connected with the characters the moment Katniss says, "I volunteer as tribute," and that sold me on the entire series. I love how this is written. I really want Suzanne Collins to write more, but so far she hasn't. I mean, she's written some middle grade, but I want more YA from her. I do recommend The Hunger Games is a great book to kind of start in the fall, to either read for the first time if you haven't done so already, or to reread. And the last two I'm going to recommend are World War II historical fiction in the YA genre, and the first one is Prisoner of Night and Fog by Anne Blankman. This is the UK cover edition, if you guys are wondering. This is not the North American one. I got it from Book Depository from a friend. And it is a great espionage story. It is not set around the Holocaust. Instead, it follows a young girl who is very closely related to Adolf Hitler herself. And when she meets and connects with a young Jewish reporter, she finds there is a lot more going on beneath the surface than she knows about. And then a lot of spying, espionage, and then fleeing for your life kind of ensues. The spying, the espionage, and all of that has some good, cozy, dark up moments, kind of edge of your seat, what's going to happen moments, so it's a good one to curl up with for the fall. It kind of is set in like the fall winter, so it's a good time frame to read this, and I really enjoyed it. There are some slight content moments, at least in the first book they were very, very slight. The second book has a bit more content to it, but also very well handled and very historically handled. So again, if you have any questions about content, let me know and I can answer those for you. But I really, really enjoyed Prisoner of Night and Fog. And last but not least, this is one that I kind of, the reason why I was doing this video, and that is Almost Autumn by Mary Ann Caroon. This is a gorgeous, stunning World War II book, and it is set in Norway. So it's set in a country we don't often hear about in our fiction, and it's just nice to get different perspectives of the different countries during that time frame. This is a gorgeously stunning, well-written book and just haunts you afterwards of some of the events. It wasn't emotional reading this book during the time, but the events still kind of haunted me afterwards, and then I felt the emotion, like it just sticks with you. Afterwards, it makes you think quite a bit longer after you finish reading this book. This book follows several different perspectives. The main perspective is Herman and Elsie, who are going on their first date, but Elsie gets stood up. She is left wondering why she was stood up by Herman, and Herman can't tell her that he's actually part of the Norway underground and can't tell her why he stood her up. We also follow Elsie's father's perspective, we follow her older sister's perspective, as well as one of their neighbors. And it was just, the switch between the perspectives were well done, the connection between all of them were really good, and it was just, like I said, a very haunting book afterwards. So it's just overall a very, very well written book, and I highly recommend it for the fall time. So those are the books I recommend for cozying up for the fall. We got some spying and espionage, we got some dystopians, some back to school reads, and some fantastical elements in there, and a contemporary even snuck its way in there by some miracle on this channel. So if you guys have any questions about any of these books I recommend for content purposes, let me know in the comments below. I'll answer them to the best of my ability without spoilers, as I promise. So leave those questions down below. If you guys have any books you like to recommend for the fall, also leave those down below. I like hearing your recommendations. If I've reviewed any of them, I'll leave those linked down below as well, so you can check out those reviews. So as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye!